Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Transfer Show with your two errant missing in action podcast hosts. Well, except one of them. I'm pointing this way, but I don't know if this works. He has been putting in a shift, hasn't he, while he's on his holidays, having his little free drinks while he's potting away to you. Whereas I abandoned you completely, and I have zero guilt about that. However, we come back with a bang, Mr. Davis. It is Dave Davis. I am Trev Downey. I am podcasting to you from my field here in beautiful rural Ireland. Dave from a muggy, clammy Edinburgh. We're both absolutely sweating buckets into our t-shirts here to get this done and have windows closed. But it's worth it, Dave, because we've got stories up the wazoo.
Literally, mate, like you said, we've been on holiday and I thought, would it just wind down? And it's just accelerated. And today just feels like an optimal day, doesn't it? Where things are going to start to really happen. Yeah. There's a million and one things to talk about, even after the fact we've already signed, 5 players or whatever it is. There's still things happening big time.
Every single GIF I can think of or look for, which basically says something along the lines of, it is ours now. That's where I feel like we are going out there, like Louis Theroux says, walking around with our willies out and absolutely just showing the world what it is to be champions and to strengthen from a position of strength. And it's everything I've always wished for. And if the latest big thing gets over the line, oh my God, we're on a whole different level to anything I've ever seen. And I'm as old as dirt, man. And I've seen it all. This is unprecedented. This will be unprecedented if the last big story happens. And this is where we should start our breakdown today, because everyone's going to want to start there with the Isak story and the developments on it. Some people, Dave, will have, I guess, maybe moved slightly away from it in frustration. Most people from the very start believed it was too much, that it couldn't have been done. It's too much money. We can never do this. And then we just keep going out doing madnesses and the story will not go away and nobody will put it to bed. People are starting to believe that this could happen. Will you please fill people in who may have just stepped away from this story a little bit on the developments, like you said, that simply happened today? News now every day, and this is probably the most encouraging yet.
Oh, mate, there's been so much news or info coming through today. I was actually getting a headache, and we've got, I don't know if you get these in Ireland, those triangle ice lollies, like the orange ones that you put in the freezer, jubbly bubblies or something I've called. So I've just been necking them while sort of absorbing all the info and chasing updates on it. But, I mean, the Isak thing's been rumbling for ages. We'll be honest, we've said for weeks, for months, haven't we? It's a case of we thought we'd get one Isak, we'd try, but we'd end up with Ekitike. And technically we weren't wrong because Hugo is on board now. He's a Liverpool player. He's absolutely, he's in Hong Kong with the lads, no problem at all. But the Isak thing has just not gone away. And we've had those developments, haven't we, where we've seen him training alone and people saying, no, it's just a recovery for injury. We see, he didn't go to the Celtic game with the Newcastle squad and people were like, no, it's the right thing. Eddie Howe was, no, I've kept him at home, because it's the right thing. We don't want the spotlight on him. And we were all a bit like, hey, that doesn't really make too much sense. We then had Eddie Howe the other day also telling us, no, I'm expecting to be on that plane to Singapore, of course. Yeah, we're confident. He loves the club and everything like that. And then we got the bomb this morning, didn't we? Via, to be fair, the Geordie Patch journalist, I think it was Craig Hope from the Mail that had it first, that Alexander Isak was not going on the tour of Singapore, the 12-day one, with a quote-unquote minor injury. Remember that minor injury, Trev, where he had something that they'd done a scan and there was nothing showing up, a la Felipe Coutinho to Barcelona. And then, again, you were like, this doesn't add up. And as someone's mentioned in the chat panel, people who were injured, like Lewis Hall, also got on the tour. Eddie Howe was also in the past as Newcastle fans. And by the way, there's bound to be Newcastle fans listening because they listen to every pod at the moment just to shout at me a lot of the time. So welcome to all the Geordies anyway. But took Callum Wilson when he was injured because he's big on team bonding. So it just didn't add up. And then the news just started to drop, didn't it, throughout the afternoon, as people suspected. And the beautiful Audi bomb on there, Isak wants to leave Newcastle United. Now, it was kind of interesting the way it was put by a lot of the Geordie journalists, that it wasn't a transfer request. He just wants to explore options outside of the club, and look at all this. This is the beautiful thing for me. In the last sort of days, in the last hours, where the last period, whatever you want to call it, there's been loads of interest, hasn't there, or loads of talks. They tried to ship him to Saudi and Al Hilal. Nada there. He's not interested. As a few reporters have said, Manchester United and Chelsea, and fair play to Sweeney Todd, Chelsea came out and said, no, we've got no interest in this player. Don't be using us to try and engineer something or suggest there's something there. Like Hugo Ekitike, Alexander Isak wants to come to Liverpool. He's made that clear to Newcastle, as we've said. He's done his part, to be fair, as in those bits. And I think the one thing to say, and not trying to sort of be harsh on Newcastle fans, we've been here, Trev. We've been in these scenarios, haven't we, with Javier Mascherano, Fernando Torres, where you're not quite the big fish in the pond and the bigger clubs, the more fancy, however you want to put it, are coming in to try and sweep your players. And sometimes it's just a case of get the best deal you possibly can. Now, there's a name, and I'm not trying to be derogatory, I'm going to mention Luke Edwards, and people will know that name. We're still adamant that it will be a disaster if they want him, that Newcastle are still saying he's not for sale. If he's absolutely not for sale and they're not countenance it, why, as per David Ornstein, are Newcastle exploring a move for Sesko at Red Bull Leipzig? Why are Newcastle also looking at Visser at Brentford and trying to do that deal? We all know the answer, don't we, really? So it just feels like this has got to develop, and we'll come to it on our next story. A Luis Diaz sale has probably got to happen as part of this sort of house player swapping chain, or whatever you want to call it. It's crazy to think, like we said, weeks or months ago, I can't remember exactly, but we reiterated it. We thought we'd try for Isak, we wouldn't be successful, we'd end up with Ekitike. We've said that repeatedly on record. There's plenty of evidence on that. Trev, there's a serious chance we're ending up with both. And people will look at that and go, but do they fit? Can they play together? And people will laugh about 4-4-2 and all the things the Geordie said, etc. Now, he commented earlier in the chat panel, and he is a proper smug bastard, but there's a great article, to be fair, from Sam Maguire on this, who actually made a point that, and it's well worth it on his Patron, Hugo Ekitike profiles quite similar in some elements to Luis Diaz, but maybe more surprisingly, Cody Gakpo. That actually Hugo Ekitike, if Luis Diaz departs, becomes your multi-functional forward, as in he could play on the left, he could play in the 9, he could even, as I mentioned in a few articles, become the support striker. Isak's a 9, isn't he? We know that. He's your tip of your arrow to score the goals. But, Trev, we can't really say anything different. There's still a lot of things got to happen. There is nothing certain right now, let's be clear. But there's a serious chance Alexander Isak is coming to Anfield.
Couple of things, because people are going to want to hear some conversation about the reality of the move and how potentially real it could be. You've just basically teed us up nicely there with the last thing you said. Just on something you said previous to that, I would say, if we are going to fully walk around with our willies out, then who cares if the two lads can play together or not? We just simply do what the best teams do when they are strong, and they just buy the good players and then work out ways in which we can use them effectively. What if we had a situation where Isak and Ekitike split the minutes without ever playing together? Anyone complain about that? I'm not when we're looking at two big shiny pots at the end of the season. That's kind of where I go with that one. It's all about this statement of intent that we're making. It's easy for people to get bogged down in the money. It's also easy for people to say things that you and I say, which is, it's not our money, we don't care. The truth is somewhere in between. We just don't like to bother too much doing people's accounting for them. There are people who are really good at it. We've got Mo Chatra who can work through stuff like that and give people reasonable understandings of what's going on with the numbers. But if we are making this statement of intent, Isak would be that. And it's incredible we've got Ekitike in already. However, the tweets that came out didn't mention Liverpool, Dave. They mentioned about Isak and his want-away situation. So the question then becomes, where could Isak potentially go? Who could potentially be in for Isak? Now, we think, don't we, that Arsenal are pretty far down the road with Gyökeres at this stage. Chelsea have signed 2 strikers. They got young Delap, and they have the boy from Brighton, João Pedro.
Yeah.
Man United are no longer in the discussion when it comes to that. I don't think, and I don't see what. Isn't that brilliant? Isn't that brilliant? And I don't see why Isak would even consider that. So we then start having to look around for other potential places where he could go, and it gets less and less likely as you go down through them. The only real rival I can see to Liverpool in this situation, realistically, from the Premier League. And I've done the sums on the foreign teams too, and I don't think many of them are in a position either who could afford it. The only real rival I can see is Chelsea. Chelsea could just do something nuts. Now, you said earlier on there was that quote about, hey, we're not interested in this guy. Yeah. We don't. You and I don't believe a word that they say. We do believe fully in the madness of Sweeney Todd. That's for sure. Do you think there's a situation where something mad like they love doing, like they pop off Pedro or Delap on loan and just get Isak in? Are they a potential rival? Because we know they have the money and they are lunatic enough to do something like this with the stockpiling. Or do you see another likely club that could be in for him? Because what I'm trying to do is see how likely it is at this stage that the only ones in the conversation really are us.
What was that game in the 80s where you used to have, I think it was characters' names like Mr. or Mrs. and he used to flip them all out and he used to ask, has he got a hat? No. Used to
down like, guess who? Guess who? Yeah.
Guess who? That's it. Honestly, it's become like that a little bit with these clubs. Like, where could Isak go as a game show? Chelsea. It's not going to be Chelsea because, like you said, the signings they made, even with the madness and the different things they've got going on, they're chasing other players we'll come to, so you can knock them down. United, it's just funny they're not even in the conversation. As you said, Arsenal, Gyökeres, down the road. I mean, people said other things like Real Madrid are not looking for attackers. In fact, they're looking to trim their attacking scenario, which we'll talk about as well. People put PSG in the chat panel. Well, no, Luis Enrique's made it clear that he loves almost that Dembele as the false nine, moving Kavicha, Barcola, and alternating with Doué, those flying forwards, as they called it in France. He's not into that sort of big, number 9 style. He's not going to change that for Alexander Isak. They've got their setup there at PSG. Also important to say, there's been various reports, that Isak's camp are quite happy to, attribute back to them. He wants to stay in competitive football because this came out, didn't it? And a lot of people were thinking when Al Hilal got linked, here we go, a big sale to Al Hilal, stupid wages, loaning back to Newcastle. Could that be the move? And Isak's, his camp have been clear that he's not interested in that at all, which you never know. You can never say with certainty, but if you knock everything down, you are just left with Anfield as the only Guess Who tile.
It's giddy making. I'm not going to lie to you. I find myself giddy at the thoughts of what we could potentially do this summer. And here's the last place I want to bring this. It's the transfer show. It's not necessarily the place for these chats, but the giddiness is bringing me there. Let's just touch on it for a second. There's a big difference, as we've seen over the years, Chelsea being a prime example, between signing a load of fantastic footballers and them then being used in the right way to win the big trophies.
True.
But with the previous immediate success that we've had of being champions, the rhythms that are there at the club, the methods that are there at the club, the coaching that we have, in a man who could eventually end up being our greatest manager ever. He has that potential now at this stage. I just feel, and kick me for being arrogant if you like, I just feel that there literally was nobody getting in our way if we get this guy as well. That's how I feel about it. Maybe I'm being naive, Dave, but it's hard to see too many people standing up to us. There are still probably some glaring areas of the team we need to address. We need to get a centre half into the squad. We would love this defensive-minded midfielder we've talked about for ages, especially with the fact that Grav can't start the season. But realistically, who's getting in our way, man? It's just so exciting.
The thing is, as much as we talk about football, formations, players and different bits, the ultimate thing in football is goals win games, and goals forgive a multitude of sins, don't they? You score more goals than the opposition, you win the game. It's simple as that. So you look at the attacking options of your rivals, and as it stands right now, and I've seen some stupid comments when I put this on a pod earlier to say, who's got elite attackers at their club? And I mean elite attackers, top level. Now, when you start going down the rivals, I don't think Arsenal have got any. There's a question mark against Gyökeres. He could bang goals. I'm not doubting that for a second. Saka's got potential, but I wouldn't put him in the elite category just now. Maybe a step away from that, could go into it. But right now, no. I look at City. Haaland, whatever you think of the cyborg, he's got elite numbers and he does elite things when he gets the service. Only a fool argues any different on that. But Foden fell away. You know, they didn't really replace Alvarez. Marmoush has got potential. But Haaland is the only elite attacker they've got. Trev, if we get Isak, you have three for me. Mo Salah, without doubt, best player in the league. Isak, number 2, of course, as a striker in the Premier League. And also, I genuinely believe, as an attacker, and he doesn't obviously play right at the top, but Florian Wirtz, there's a reason why Real Madrid, Manchester City, all Bayern Munich, all the other big clubs in world football wanted that player. We would have 3. And backing those up would be someone like Hugo Ekitike, as we've heard from all the data-related people who they think has got real potential, and others at the same time as well. So if you have those attacking options that just outstrip your rivals like that, as long as the rest of the stuff behind it isn't too bad, and it's not with Alisson, Van Dijk and all those, etc., I'm struggling to disagree with you. I've got to be honest.
What a time to be alive. Our next story is on potential ins and outs connected. We've heard the Rodrigo thing rumbling along. We've also seen a couple of places recently, including a returned form of bad news, Jimbo Pierce, saying that it was highly unlikely or that he wasn't considered a target for Liverpool currently. We know there's the Malik Fofana story. And obviously, any of these further incomings, including Isak, will be linked to us getting some things nailed down. Diaz is the guy who will probably earn us the most money. Maybe Darwin Núñez could in a different world if he was going to Saudi, but he's less and less, it seems, interested in that. Or maybe he'll get closer and closer to being interested if other teams can't pony up the right amount. But this Diaz to Bayern thing, I've listened to your shows while you've been away, and the only one more bored of it, man, than you is me. It is so freaking tedious dealing with this lot, and they're just like, yeah, we need some time to think, and we'll get back to you. This stuff about just if you are going to bid and get, don't tell me they need to quibble about money. I just don't see a strategy here. And so I know I'm throwing a googly in here, but we've already spoken about Newcastle. Is there a world in which Luis Diaz, a Premier League proven attacker, a Premier League winner, someone who a lot of Reds are very high on, could actually look at a move within the Premier League? We've all heard the stories. He doesn't like the climate, blah, blah, blah. So Newcastle is not going to be any more attractive to him probably than Liverpool, but it might be if they offered the wages. Anyway, talk to us about Bayern, and then is there any other likely outlets for Diaz apart from Saudi? Because I don't see him or Darwin going there purely for their career's sake.
Yeah, I mean, I sound like my 13-year-old niece with this, but I am so bored, like you, of this Bayern thing. Just make this new bid. And we keep hearing through various journalists, is it on the screen there from Romano? Bayern's new proposal is set to be sent soon as planned since last weekend. Like, are they sending this by carrier pigeon or something? Because it just seems to be taking like absolutely years. But I do actually suspect this happens, that from digging around this, yeah, Diaz's camp have been speaking to Bayern, and Diaz's camp are a bit sneaky on this, Trev. They've been laying the groundwork, especially to, and in respect, Pipe Sierra, people all know who that is, from the Colombian side, with the stuff they've been providing him with, let's say. But I mean, the stuff that they've been leaking about, oh, this is his net wage being tiny, not true. Also, as Pipe put it out, and we know where it's come from. Luis Diaz is only the 15th best paid player at Liverpool. So sorry, are we supposed to believe that Luis Diaz has gone around the dressing room asking for people's P60s to see what they earn annually or their wage slips? Do you know what I mean? Type of thing. It's all part of the narrative because he wants the new contract. He's not going to get it from Liverpool. Being honest, in short, for other Premier League sides, no, the Manchester City thing's dead, isn't it? They've bought their players in. Arsenal have got Madueke in, so it's not going to be there. We never sell to Arsenal anyway. It's not going to be Newcastle for reasons there. They've already got their wingers sorted, haven't they? With like Gordon, Alanga, they've bought in as well. It does feel like it is going to be Bayern Munich or no one, and I suspect this is almost like that housing chain, isn't it? It's got to be the dominoes of Diaz moves to Bayern Munich, so then we can move for Isak, and it's got to flow in that effect.
I don't know if you've ever experienced the horror of trying to sell a house and buy a house at the same time, but that's very much what it feels like here, that chain you're describing. And as you say, one domino needs to fall before the rest can. It's just very frustrating having to wait on these very, very, very delaying Germans to get their act together. Let's go to the Ibou Konate story, which you and I have discussed, I think, all summer long and in the pre-summer shows that we did as well. It was one that was rumbling in the background. The numbers were out there, for whether real or not, that he was looking to go from 80 to 200,000. I'm not sure how real those numbers are, but he was looking for a sizable jump, and you can't blame him for that. I think he's dead right to look for that. And Liverpool were balking at the figure. That's basically where we're at. Now, if you have at this stage not realized that Liverpool are not the easiest to deal with, even with their own players, when it comes to arguing about contracts, I'm not sure if you're actually a sentient human, because we saw it, didn't we, with Mo and with Virgil, two lads who in their right mind would want to see them go, but the club played hardball with them. They were upset. They were annoyed. They were pissed off.
Yeah.
Ibou's going to have to do the same thing. Him and his agent are just going to have to fight it out. The problem here has always been, we wondered whether or not the head was turned by the interest of Real Madrid and the interest of PSG. And it would not be many humans whose head would not be turned by such interest, regardless of our status as champions, because, he's not a Liverpool lad.
Yeah.
And he's got one career. So we did hear a rumor, I don't know if it's true or not, and it was only from one source, that a contract had been preferred. It's probably pure fluff. But do we know where we are with this Ibou Konate story at this stage?
Yeah, there's been a few reports like on the screen that Liverpool are back in talks with Ibou Konate and his agent. I'll be honest, I know that the tweet on the screen says they received a new contract proposal from Sasha there. I've not managed to hear that or get that corroborated. I'm not doubting that info. It just, we would love to be saying, yeah, all your big journalists are saying it's on the verge of being done. Of course we would. We've been quite clear on what we think of Ibou. But as to reports we can get, Liverpool are back talking to the Konate camp. So we've got to see that as a positive there, haven't we? The big thing on it, though, Trev, realistically, is that it does seem Liverpool are, and I get this, prepared to take the gamble right to the end. And if they can't get it done, let him go on a free. That they're almost happy as it stands now to say, do you know what? We'd rather, like we did with Virgil and, Mo, try and get it into the last year because we don't want him to leave. He's better in the team. He's more valuable to us right now than selling him for a pittance that way and seeing what we can do. I mean, the one thing I keep thinking about Konate is, yes, you're right. He's got one career. He's a Paris boy. All those factors. We know Real Madrid have been in his ear. This is not a straightforward, simple decision. Anyone who thinks differently is not really looking at it. However, Liverpool couldn't be showing him more ambition than they're showing now, could they? This couldn't be a more exciting time to look at this project and say, look at what Liverpool are doing, basically. This is a club to be at, a destination club at the same time as well. And also, as Paul Joyce mentioned in his article and various bits, Mark Gay is now still one to keep an eye on because that had gone cold, hadn't it? Because Palace had put sort of a ridiculous fee for a player with a year left there. And Liverpool were like, well, we're never going to match that. But as quite a few journalists have come to in the last sort of 48 hours or so, Palace are now back in a scenario where sense prevails. We're going to sell Mark Gay, but we still want to get a decent price. Now, suggestions are that they're still looking around 45 million, which is still a bit rich for Liverpool's blood. I think we're still looking around the 40 million mark. However, that doesn't feel a big gap, does it? A 5 million gap in terms of transfers. I know, obviously, we all love to have 5 million quid in our account, but in terms of elite football, that is a very small gap. So, chatting to a few journalists today, as David Lynch said, Gay to Liverpool is definitely one to keep an eye on. And from all the talks and asking around, Gay still prefers the move to Anfield over anywhere else. So we'll see if that gets done as well. But yeah, we don't want to get carried away with the Ibu news, but there is positives. They do seem to be talking to him and his agent again.
Do you think the Mark Gay move or the first team ready centre-half move is essential if Ibu stays, regardless of whether Ibu stays, or only if Ibu goes?
Nah, I think you've got to do it. You've got to get at least one in. You can't start the season with three centre-backs being Van Dijk, Ibu, and Joe Gomez, because there's injury question marks against two of those to start with, and you can't start the season with three set. You need four. Many have wanted five minimum, haven't they? They've wanted extra or an option bought in there. So we absolutely have to get another centre back in, no questions asked. For me, before the season starts, and I'm going to be honest as well. If your centre back collection is Van Dijk, Konate, Gomez, and Mark Gay, that's the best in the league. End of discussion.
Could not agree more, which is exactly why I want to see that happen. Did you see the weird stories linking us with Charlie Cresswell? I find that weird because we've just let go the guy who was playing opposite him in the England under-21 team, who was actually younger than Cresswell as well, and many people would say had a higher ceiling. So I struggle with that one. It just felt like somebody saw that a young fellow was available and put two and two together and thought homegrown and went, yeah, we'll make that a Liverpool story. Is there actually any heft to that, or is it just fanciful thinking, do you think?
There is heft to that. He is one of the three real centre-backs that we've had a good look at as Gay alternatives. Everyone knows about Hato, but we'll talk about that later. That's a non-starter now. He's been mentioned many a times. Yeah, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce him, but the young Italian 6'4" kid at Parma, I think he was 18 or 19, he's been looked at as well. But yeah, absolutely, Charlie Cresswell. And one of the big things that they do like about Charlie Cresswell is an aerial duel success of over 70%. Played at Millwall as well. So, used to getting kicked around or kicking people, shall we say, as well. Just won the under-21. And I get it. People say, well, hold on, Jarell Kwanzaa and that in and out. But, yeah, there's a lot of things that Liverpool like about Charlie Cresswell. It's still, if you ask me to bet, the smart money is still on Gay, but I would not rule out Charlie Cresswell just now.
Sam, if you're still out there in the chat, let us know what you think of that aerial duel percentage. I know you like an aerial duel percentage. We will move then to our next story because we need to start knocking over these skittles.
Yeah.
Darwin Núñez, we've already mentioned. Federico Chiesa, we haven't. Núñez and Chiesa, along with Diaz, seem to be very, very much likely to go. It's becoming more and more likely as time moves on. And everything seems to have, as you said here, gone a bit quiet on the Núñez front. I still am hugely dubious about the Saudi thing for him. I think he has had the reality of interest from high-profile clubs like Napoli and Atletico. I think that probably does a job on him. I think the interest from Bayern does a job on Luis Diaz. And so we were looking at money from Saudi as being, vital to our kitty. That's what you and I both thought. But if these moves happen, I think they're going to happen at the death because those players will want to wait until the very end to see whether they can swing something that's in a major European league, preferably Champions League. So I think that's really complicating everything. Chiesa is in a slightly different field, and the Chiesa offers I've heard about from different clubs are so minuscule. In comparison to what he was first worth. I understand we paid minuscule money for him, that I just don't see any great advantage to moving him on unless he's just literally not fancied by the manager at all.
Yeah, I mean, the whole, let's call them forwards, wide forwards. I mean, Chiesa, first of all, there's various links. I mean, it was quite telling that he didn't go on the 29-man tour to the Far East, and that's quite telling. And they said he had a minor injury, was the club line. Just for anyone that believes that or fully invests in that, Chiesa in that Stoke game scored the 90th minute, the fifth goal, and then was seen doing, the warm down all the bits with the S&C staff as well. So we honestly believe he picked up a minor injury in that period that keeps him at home for 2 weeks. I think, as Romana's a few reported, there's a ton of interest from Italy. And you mentioned minuscule amounts. There's been various stories, as it's there on the screen. Atalanta prepared to basically almost give us back the 10 million, isn't it, that we paid, and do an exchange, if you want to call it that, a refund, whatever you want to suggest it as. I think the key thing just on Chiesa, first of all, the tune, banging, absolutely brilliant. The player, not fancied by Arne Slot. I don't really know what more evidence people need, in all honesty. You saw the limited amount of minutes that he had. And also, as a young breakout star, you've seen him, I'm sure, in pre-season, people, but we've mentioned him before, Rio and Gamoa. They've not wanted to block his pathway into the first team. Now, just to be clear, that doesn't mean playing 25 games at all. But when you look at Chiesa's minutes, I think it was, 600, 700 across all competitions, wouldn't it? That could easily go to young Rio, couldn't it? And could be really good for him in the cups and things like that at the same time as well. So I think it's almost, I think they take their money back and just do it that way to get him off the books. Núñez, like you say, it just feels like what is going to happen. They're waiting for something. Are Saudi actually going to pony up, or is that just an old story that just gets thrown out there? I hope it's not, but we'll have to see. The two winger updates I don't know if you'll like them, Trev, but we'll go to them. We mentioned bad news, James Pearce. James Pearce was spot on with this the other night, by the way, and he got a lot of stick. That bit he put out that Real Madrid's Rodrigo is currently not viewed as a possible replacement. Technically, that's a true statement, and James Pearce tweeted it. David Lynch reiterated it as his info as well. The big reason why there's been talks with Rodrigo's camp, this family, as we've said before, Pini Jahavi, the super agent's been involved. Young Rodrigo, whether it's all Pini, ask his agent, ask him for it. Trev, €400 a week, for the basic wage ask was the info we got. I mean, that's Allison VVD Salah levels, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? And that's before bonuses and other things as well. So, on top of the fee would cost as well from Real Madrid, I think right now that's why that's just completely off the table unless something changes, and there's a DFS style sale basically in what he's asking for there. And what it's thrown into the mix is that a few have said it or a few asking about it. Malik Fofana, Liverpool are having a real good look at him as an option. And people will talk about different options, but he would make sense for me a lot because he would feel like for the right money, that young FSG style signing, the one they could develop and work with to make more at the right price point as well. Because obviously we're signing a lot of elite attackers, top level names, but it's always good when we're buying nerd style signings as well, aren't we, at the same time? So Malik Fofana is being looked at again heavily as well. So that is definitely one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Fofana is still quite young, isn't he? He's still sub 22, I think, isn't he? So yeah, that's interesting. Something occurred to me there as you were speaking about the likelihood of the Luis Diaz move to Bayern and all the rest of it. It really is, when you think about what Rodrigo's asking for, it really is possibly one of the only destinations that Rodrigo could point himself towards as well. And I wonder is that kind of rumbling around in the background, and maybe complicating the Diaz thing, because they're, Bayern are not afraid to pay big wages, maybe not that big, but do you think, have you heard anything about that? I find it weird that I haven't heard Rodrigo to Bayern and stuff. I think that's a bit odd.
No, I think, I'm not saying it isn't possible, but I think just in terms of where Rodrigo's been looking at or speaking about, I mean, he's ruled out Arsenal, isn't he? That they don't seem to be in the mix at all. And people said things like, oh, he could be PSG. I am intrigued to really see where he does end up, because he is clearly looking for a move, because rather than bringing in Mastantuono, Xavi Alonso's spoken to all these players about their attack and where they sees them. And various reports from Madrid, Rodrigo is going to struggle for minutes, and he's been told that. But if you're going to struggle for minutes and it's World Cup year, maybe don't start your demands with 400,000 euros a week if you want to get regular football. Just a suggestion, but what do I know, eh?
Yeah, and also for the record, that image, that graphic at the bottom of the page that you've got displayed at the moment is one of the best things I've ever seen. Right, last Liverpool-related story has got to do with Harvey Elliott and Tyler Morton, both of whom were linked with moves to West Ham, and those moves were obviously supposed to be transfers, not loans, but now that's what's being talked about. It seems as if West Ham have either gotten cold feet or are starting to muck about a bit. I'm not really sure what the thinking is here. I saw a lovely interview with Harvey Elliott, a very recent one, where he was asked directly about the future, and he just speaks so beautifully about the club. He's such a genuine kid. He says he loves everything about the club. He wants to stay here, but he has to think about his career. It's so sad that it's not going to be at Liverpool. But if West Ham are going to prick around and start talking about loaning Harvey Elliott, then he needs to look elsewhere. What do we know, and why is this loan thing suddenly come from a situation where we had been thinking about transfer fees?
Yeah, it was. I mean, we said it a while ago that Graham Potter has already spoken to Tyler Morton as well. He loves him, and Liverpool were expecting a bid for that. And West Ham advanced and start speaking to Liverpool about Harvey Elliott. So it had the look as a few weeks ago, didn't it? This could be a nice little double deal, something around 55 million, maybe, something like that, and everyone's happy. And like you said, it's such a shame. It's so much a shame we can't put Harvey Elliott's heart and mind into Darwin Núñez and Luis Diaz a little bit, isn't he? Because exactly, he's saying all the right things, and he's come back early after the Euros. He's cut short his holiday because he wants to show Arne Slot what he can do. But as he's also been honest, he's got to be selfish, think about his career. Harvey Elliott also mentioned the World Cup as well, didn't he? That's one of his aspirations, to get in that World Cup squad. And in simple terms, this sounds horrible and it's not being derogatory of the player. There just isn't a future for him at Liverpool, is there, with all the changes and the players coming in? So, everyone was expecting that West Ham bid, but the last had digging around on it. West Ham had asked about a loan with an option. And then Liverpool are kind of going, hold on, we were talking about a fee and all that. What do you mean a loan with an option? Liverpool wouldn't mind a loan with an obligation in that regard, which is different. So I am intrigued to see what happens here. It just could be one that, you mentioned happens later in the window. I do wonder about this one, and Harvey just sort of biding his time a little bit. But yeah, Liverpool are not amused with West Ham, is my info, because they got permission early to speak to Tyler Morton. They'd shown that real keenness and talked about doing a deal around Harvey Elliott. And now they're talking about a loan with an option. They seem to be a bit quiet on Tyler Morton. And hey, it could change. Who knows? But yeah, info right now, Liverpool are not too impressed with West Ham.